Toy Story 5 is one of those movies I was pretty skeptical about, even though that's the same exact thing that happened when they announced Toy Story 4, because we all know Toy Story 3 just felt like the perfect bow to tie on this trilogy. At the time, the other Pixar sequels that weren't Toy Story 2 and 3 weren't really hitting for a lot of people, especially me, but I saw Toy Story 4 when it came out back in 2019, 7 years ago. That's absolutely insane. But I saw it in theaters when I moved to Florida. I was working for Disney at the time, and I thought it was pretty good. It wasn't as great as the first three, but it was way better than Toy Story 4 had any right to be. I had no faith in Pixar doing any sort of justice to the franchise, and they proved me wrong. And the first Toy Story came out in 1995. I was born a year later. So Toy Story 1, Toy Story 2, and The Jungle Book, those were like my three movies I grew up on. Obviously, Toy Story has a special place in my heart. I wouldn't say it's the movie that inspired me to want to make movies one day, but it's definitely the thing that got me interested in watching movies for sure. But just because you decide to make another Toy Story movie, it's not like I'm gonna go out and be like, oh yes, finally. What I really wanted was Toy Story 5. And I actually got invited to see Toy Story 5 early. I saw it a few days ago at a press screening. I've been sitting on it for about 5 days now. And I gotta say, after sitting with it, after thinking about it, after experiencing it in the theater, I think Toy Story 5 is really good. Like for me, I think it's easily the best Pixar movie since Soul. Granted, I am not as high on a lot of the other recent Pixar movies like a lot of other people are. Like there's some good ones for sure, but none of them have like hit that high for me. And I don't think Toy Story 5 hits the high of Soul still, but everything besides that, I think it's the best movie in the past, what, 5-6 years? And I still think we're a tier below like the incredible run that Pixar went on in the late 90s and early 2000s. Not even early 2000s, like the entire 2000s. But in this video, I want to talk about why Toy Story 5 works, why if you are a parent, this is the best movie you could take your kids to probably all year. And then we'll even talk about where I think it ranks amongst the other 4 Toy Story movies. But before that, what is the story of Toy Story 5? Why should you care? And just like all the other Toy Story movies, the premise is pretty simple. You still have Bonnie as this new kid playing with the toys, and her parents decide to get her a Lilypad, which is essentially just an iPad. And just like every single person that has access to social media, Bonnie becomes addicted to this screen. And the toys are trying to prevent this thing from ruining her entire life. There's more to it that I won't get into because I know that the movie still hasn't come out officially and I want you to experience it for yourself. But when they announced Toy Story 4, up until the point where I actually sat down and watched the movie, I had absolutely no faith in the idea. I thought Pixar was gonna mess it up. It made sense from a business perspective to just make a bunch of money because Toy Story is such a big thing. And now you have people like me, even though I don't have kids yet, there are a lot of people in my life that are starting to have kids. This is like the perfect time to cash in on my generation because we grew up with Toy Story. We're gonna want our kids to experience Toy Story. It just makes sense from a business perspective. But from a storytelling perspective, I was so against the idea. And then Toy Story 4 ended up being pretty good. And Toy Story 5, I was still skeptical of, but as soon as they announced that this was gonna be the central premise of the idea, I was a lot more sold than I was when they announced Toy Story 4. And I'm not gonna say anything groundbreaking here, but I do think having this be the premise of the movie is a pretty genius idea for right now. Like, I think we all know we spend way too much time on screens. This is not a revolutionary take, but I do think there are a lot of people that don't actively think about this kind of stuff on a daily basis, right? They kind of just buy their kids an iPad. They buy themselves a video game console or a new computer or a new phone, and they're on the new app and they're addicted to the new app. Like, we are in an endless cycle of consumption on a screen. Listen, even streaming services, I talk about movies for a living. I want to make movies for a living, but if your entire life is watching TV and movies, you have no life to live whatsoever. And I do think it's important for a movie like Toy Story that is going to be seen by so many people. This is going to be one of the biggest movies of the year easily. It's a really big deal. And I don't even think they focused on every aspect of technology. This is very much a movie about social media. And I do think it addresses that this is a really difficult era to grow up in because even though, you know, I'm going to be 30 this year, so I'm ancient, but I grew up at the perfect time where like social media wasn't really a thing until I was pretty much in high school, and we got limited screen time too, but you would play video games, and whether that be by yourself or with your friends, like there was like a communal thing about it. You weren't online comparing yourselves to people all the time. You weren't really worried that you were being left out because you were seeing pictures of someone else online. Like that wasn't really a thing until maybe like 8th grade or freshman year of high school. So to be a kid that has access to that kind of stuff when you're like 8 years old, 9 years years old, I think is pretty crazy. And I think Toy Story 5 does a really good job at portraying that side of social media. And I don't want to sound corny about it, but I don't think there have been a lot of important movies this decade. There have been like a small handful, but there haven't been some where I'm like, everyone should go watch this. And I know that's sad to say, and I wish I could say that more. And I don't even think Toy Story 5 is like a masterpiece. I'm not going to sit here and say it's the definitive best movie of the year or anything like that, but I do think everyone that sees it is going to at least have fun with it and enjoy it. I think there's going to be a lot of people that love it. And I think the best thing about that is up to this point in the year, I think this is the most important movie of 2026. And I'm sure there's going to be stuff that comes out by the end of the year around Oscar season that is a bit more effective and is telling a more grand story about a more important issue. And look, I know the world is a messed up place. I'm not ignorant to the fact that there's a lot more dire problems to a degree, like there's people's lives that are in danger in certain parts of the world. And of course, that is a big priority. But I think we could also acknowledge that everyone that has access to this stuff and sits on it all day, it's been isolating us. It is one of the things that I feel like we could all change on a daily basis and try and limit as much as possible. And the fact that Toy Story 5 does that in such an effective way, I think is a real compliment to all the filmmaking. This movie's going to crush it at the box office. It's probably by December going to be in the top 3 highest grossing films of the year. And if that means millions of people are going to watch this and even one parent is like, yeah, you know what? Maybe I shouldn't let my kid have the iPad for a while, like let them grow up being a kid. If it could have that effect on one parent, I think this movie's a success. And I think it's going to have a much bigger impact than just one parent. And it's something that I think everybody should be able to get behind. But these YouTubers these days, like there are people that make content on this platform that have no kids that will not see Toy Story 5. And they will call this movie woke because it's making fun of Apple. I've also seen some early reactions to this movie, and I've seen a couple people say, you know what? The message is pretty basic. It's a family movie where the target demographic is for 6-year-olds. We're not supposed to sit there and try and piece together the message like we're watching a Tarkovsky film. And I don't review a lot of animated movies on my channel for a couple of reasons. And it's nothing against the genre. I think the genre is super important. Whether you're making something for kids or for adults, like the art form itself is important to preserve. And making stuff for kids is more important than people make it out to be. Like you have to give them good stuff with good teachings that they could grow up on and even look back and be like, man, I loved that as a kid. I can't wait to show this to my kids. I think that's what made Disney so big, like pre-2000, was even though they had some ups and downs, like even in the 90s when Walt Disney wasn't around, like they were making so many incredible movies. And I think the difference between those kinds of movies and a lot of things that come out now is that there are some things that are made for kids and there are some things that are made for families. A kid's movie is something that like a 5 or 6-year-old is going to enjoy. The parents are going to sit there and be like, what the am I doing here? And I feel like over the past 15, 20 years, there's been a lot more stuff in the kids category than there has been for the family category. And I know I review movies online. I'm not going to go sit through Trolls World Tour. It's just not going to happen. But I do think Disney and Pixar in their primes are like the perfect example of this, where they make stuff that anybody can enjoy, whether you're 7 years old, 17, 47, or 70, no matter what. You watch Finding Nemo, you're going to love it. It's a fantastic movie. And I just grew up in the prime of Pixar that I will always give their new movie a shot, and I want them to reach the heights that they once did, because there's 3 things that make a great Pixar movie. First is the creativity, which you could argue Toy Story 5 isn't the best at because we're in the 5th entry of this franchise. There's only so much you could do, but they're at least creative with the idea. They're like, you know what? We have a story here that is so good, that is so important, that we think a lot of people will connect with, and we're going to put it in a Toy Story movie because that's our most respected franchise at this point. Sorry to the Cars fans out there. So we'll give Toy Story 5 like a half check in creativity. The second thing is emotion, which Pixar has nailed in most of their films. I mean, they'll literally teach you about the first 10 minutes of Up in film school. When Pixar is on, they are on. They will make the entire theater weep. And I got to take my girlfriend to this movie, and she was sobbing at 3 different times. It didn't get a tear out of me personally, but it got pretty damn close. Like I definitely felt the urge to at 1 or 2 different scenes. There was one where I was like, oh, I'm close. Like I was getting a bit watery. And I feel like Pixar movies haven't done that for me in a while. And like I said, I went to a press screening. So I was in a room full of, I don't know, 20, 30 people, most of them being men over the age of like 25. So from that demographic, I don't expect a ton of tears. But if I went to a screening opening day with just the general public, there are going to be a lot of tears. They're going to need to bring in a mop after most of the screenings. So in terms of emotion, I think Toy Story 5 5 definitely checks the box. And I think the third thing that a lot of people tend to forget about, because Pixar hasn't done this as well over the past decade, is the humor. Like, there was a time where Pixar movies were hilarious. That's why so many families enjoyed them. Like, I think my favorite Pixar movie might be Monsters, Inc. I have to sit down and think about it. But the last time I watched that movie, I mean, the creativity's there, the emotion's there, but the humor, the entire film is hilarious. And it's so original with a lot of its jokes. And Pixar used to be the masters at that, and they haven't really done that in a while. I'm not going to sit here and say that Toy Story 5 is like the funniest movie Pixar has ever made. I didn't love Hoppers. I thought it was just okay. There was one joke in Hoppers that I thought was genuinely hilarious and did make me laugh, and maybe I chuckled a couple times throughout it. But for the most part, a lot of it just kind of annoyed me. Toy Story 5, I didn't bust out laughing at any point, but it felt like every 2 or 3 minutes I at least chuckled or smiled. That might sound like it's a negative, but coming from someone like me, I tend to not bust out laughing at a lot of movies these days. And most of the time, a joke is made and I sit there with a frown on my face in silence. So the fact that Toy Story 5 at least had me in a good mood the entire time and I was chuckling pretty consistently, I think it's a testament to the fact that the movie is pretty funny. There was a mom that brought her kid to this screening and he was howling laughing at a lot of stuff. So I think the movie is going to work for a lot of the general public. A lot of people are going to find this funny. So in terms of the 3 most important boxes when it comes to Pixar, I think it checks all of them. Well, at least 2.5 of them. Because like I said, we're on Toy Story 5. I'm happy it's really good. In terms of other things I liked about the movie, I didn't know much about Toy Story 5 going in. I really only knew about the iPad thing. So it really surprised me when I found out that Jessie is actually the lead of this entire movie, which I thought was a really interesting choice because Jessie has always been a great character, but it feels like Toy Story has always been reliant on Buzz Lightyear and Woody, which makes sense because they're 2 of the best animated characters ever made, and Tom Hanks and Tim Allen have great chemistry. And maybe this is the thing where YouTubers with no kids are like, oh my God, Toy Story 5 is so woke. We have a girl boss female as the protagonist. But for the 99.99% of you that don't give a but I was really curious to see what they would do with her story. And by the end of the movie, I think it was definitely the best choice. I won't go into why that's the best choice because, again, the movie hasn't come out yet. I'm not going to talk about spoilers, but I think the payoff is there. It feels like the journey we go on is worth it. And that's all you could ask for in a Toy Story 5. They also give a lot of attention to Bonnie. Now, admittedly, I haven't seen Toy Story 4 more than once, so I don't remember how much she's actually in Toy Story 4, but it feels like we get a lot more of her here. We probably get more of her here than any of the other Toy Story movies with Andy. And because of that, I think the emotion of the Pixar storytelling is elevated a lot more than it was in a few of the other Pixar movies recently. And that genuinely surprised me because it's not like the highlights of Toy Story 1 through 3 is Andy. You know, to a degree, he's always out of the picture a little bit because it's about someone growing up and these toys trying to help them grow up. But this one just had such a more human element to it that has to do with all this screen time that I found all of that kind of stuff really effective. And honestly, the only negative I have with this movie, and it's not even that big of a negative, it's just something I don't think Toy Story 5 does as good as the first 4 Toy Story movies, is that I feel like every Toy Story movie has done a really good job at introducing new characters. Like Toy Story 2, we get Jessie Bullseye. Toy Story 3, Lotso was a good villain, but Ken and Barbie were hilarious. Toy Story 4, Forky I thought was going to be annoying. I ended up loving Forky. I thought he was hilarious. And they have all the other additions in Toy Story 4 that felt really good. Toy Story 5, they have some additions. A lot of people in my theater really liked them a lot, especially Smarty Pants, I think is his name, played by Conan O'Brien. And there were a couple jokes I was like, oh, okay, that's a little bit funny. But for the most part, they were kind of just fine. Not bad by any means. I just didn't feel like they were as memorable as some of the other Toy Story side characters have been in the past 4 movies. I do think the Lilypad is a fun antagonist. They do a lot of creative stuff with the technology and how it's connected to certain things and all that kind of stuff. It was really well thought out. There's a lot of good jokes with it. There's a lot of stakes because you feel like this thing has to get out of Bonnie's life. And I think all of that was handled with a good amount of creativity. In terms of where it ranks amongst the other Toy Story movies, for me, 1 and 2 are like the peak. That's the top of the mountain. I used to put 3 there as well. When I rewatched 3 a few years ago, I thought most of 3 is pretty good. It's just the fact that the last 10 minutes are some of the best 10 minutes in movie history. Like, it really is that good when you watch the end of Toy Story 3. I think that was the first movie ever that made me cry. I don't even remember how old I was, but I remember being like, why do people cry at movies? That's so lame. And then everyone my age cried at Toy Story 3 because it was all about growing up. So I still put Toy Story 3 a league above Toy Story 4 and 5. 4 and 5 quality-wise feel almost the same. Like if you really didn't like Toy Story 4, there's a chance you don't like Toy Story 5 either. But I do think Toy Story 5, in terms of storytelling and emotion and the idea, the message itself, it does definitely put it a little bit above Toy Story 4. I think there's a lot of people that have said Toy Story 5 belongs in the conversation with the first three, and I don't fully agree with that, but I do think the message is so effective, and like I said, I do feel like this is the most important movie of the year so far, that I understand why they're making the argument that it does belong with the first three. For me personally, I would give this a very strong 7 out of 10. For those of you new to the channel, I think a 6 is a good movie. When I first walked out of it, I was really tempted to go 8 because there are points where I'm like, man, this is a great movie. And maybe after a rewatch, I could get there, but I think for now, I'm gonna sit at the 7. I feel good with the 7. I think this is one of those movies I could recommend it to anybody. I think anyone would enjoy it. If you're a parent, go take your kids to this. I will not be reviewing Minions and Monsters. And I hope you all have a good time. I hope you turn off these screens. But before you turn off this screen, be sure to subscribe because I'm talking about movies on this channel until I make movies of my own. And you don't even have to watch, you know? I don't even watch a lot of YouTube videos anymore. I kind of just find the ones I find interesting and listen to them when I go on a run or a walk. So you don't have to watch me. But if you want to listen to me, be sure to subscribe. And this is Chase. Thank you so much for watching as always. And I hope you have an awesome day. Thanks.